Hi, King. Welcome. So this is the importance of maps, and what I have here today, the information I'm going to share with you, it's pretty darn important. You might be thinking, well, Mr. Canton, why would knowing how to read a map be important? Like, I got a phone with me, I can read a map. Maybe, but I present to you some kind of today very compelling reasons on why knowing how to read a map very well could save your life. Let's dive in. So, your targets for today are to be able to explain why maps are important, to be able to identify the main features on a map, known as totals, and to create a mental map. Here we go. So, what we have today is a little comic to start things off. It's one of my all time favorites. I'll give you a moment to soak in a little Calvin and Hobbes here. Here we are. He says, "Hi, Mom. When's lunch?" "Later, Calvin. I'm busy. But I'm hungry now. I want to eat." A map to the refrigerator. Hilarious. No, but seriously, if you're not a big fan of Calvin and Hobbes, go check out Calvin and Hobbes. You will have a better life because of it. So, reasons why maps are important. Example number one, the Titanic. Now, full disclosure, I have never seen the film The Titanic. I am one of very few. I know. But I understand kind of all the pop culture references. And more importantly, I understand what happens when the ship's captain was unable to read a map. Spoiler alert, iceberg. Jack drifts off to an icy grave. Rose apparently manages to not let him on the plank, even though that there's room for it, and lives to a ripe old age. So way to go, Rose. Bye, Jack. So again, had the ship's captain able to read a map, Jack probably would have lived. He couldn't. Example number two, a film referred to as, or not referred to, called The Blair Witch Project. Not a film I'd recommend you watch, especially if you're like me and you're a big scaredy cat and you're not, and you're afraid of like scary movies. That's me. But anyway, these fine folks out here, they go out roaming the woods of Maryland, I believe it is, in search of the Blair Witch. I don't know why you'd want to go search for the Blair Witch, but they do. And as they're searching for the Blair Witch, of course, they can't read maps. So what happens when you can't read maps? Well, they get lost. What happens when they get lost? Well, they get angry. They get lost some more, and then instead of them finding the Blair Witch finds them, and well, end scene, because it's kind of gnarly what happens to them. It's not great. So, what I'm trying to tell you is this: if you can read a map, you will get along with your friends. Hey, who doesn't love getting along with their friends? You will find your way back home. That's also nice to know. And you will live to a ripe old age. All of these are wonderful things that will happen to you, yes, you, if you can read a map. Now, if you can't read a map because maybe you skipped this day in global studies, well, I've got some bad news for you. You will argue and fight with your friends. Not good. You will cost a whole lot. Definitely not good. And you will die a horrible, gruesome death at the hands of supernatural demons. Really not good. So basically, gang, what I am trying to tell you is this: maps are life. There you go. Now you're convinced. You're sitting there going, oh my goodness. Let's cut to the chase, Mr. Canton. I know that it is important to be able to read a map. So enough of the intro. I'm convinced. I'm on board, because if I can't read a map, well, we know what happens if you can't read a map. Cussing, fighting, supernatural demons. Not great. Anyway, let's move ahead. Here are some key skills that you're going to need to be able to read a map. In the intro, I had mentioned totals. Now, total stands for something, because you're going, that's not how you spell total, Mr. Canton. I know. Here we go. So I want you to take out a sheet of paper, notebook paper, something like that. And I want you to write this down. I want you to write totals right down along the edge of your paper. So TODALSS. What does the T stand for? Well, that is title. O stands for orientation. We'll look at that in a second. Orientation, you might be hearkening back to sixth grade when you went to Long Lake Conservation Center, also known as LLCC, and you did orienteering. That's when you were out in the woods, you had your little compass. Funny story about that. I went to LLCC when I was in, I don't know, sixth, seventh, eighth grade, something like that. I think I might have been eighth grade, actually. And I remember doing orienteering, and I was doing a really good job, or so I thought. It was in the middle of winter. I was running through the woods. There was a rival school there, or at least in my mind, they were a rival school. I don't know who they were, but there was another school there, and we were running through the woods, and it was this competition, and I was going to win because I'm a little bit competitive. And as we're running through the woods, we're going to waypoint to waypoint, and I'm doing an excellent job because I could read a map, because I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to cuss. I wanted to live to a ripe old age, all that good stuff. And I was making my way through the woods, and I thought, as I rounded the corner to that last waypoint, that I was going to win. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this little dude from this other school just came up and whoop, shoved me. Yeah, straight up shoved me right into a snowbank and then kept on running. He won. I didn't. I lost. I'm not bitter about it. Promise. Anyway, orientation. Then, date. Yes, not the kind that you might hope to have going into the weekend, but no, a date, as in, like, well, we'll see, a date, like on a calendar. Author, that's what the A stands for. The L stands for legend, not as in like that dude's a legend, but more as in a key, but not as in a key to open a door. We'll see. Scale, not to weigh things, but to, check distance, and source. Where'd you get your map? So that's what total stands for. And I hope you wrote those down along the edge of your paper. Title, orientation, date, author, legend, scale, source. So let's break it down a little bit further. Title. Why is that important? Well, we'll look at some examples, but basically the title of a map, it shows you the purpose of a map. It tells you kind of what a map is all about. We could look at all kinds of maps, and typically, most often, the map that we think of when we think of a map is probably a kind that, like a map of a state or a city, or most of us are probably visioning a world map where you've got like all of the countries labeled and all of their borders and maybe some oceans and things like that. But there are a plethora, a host, a ton, a boatload of different maps out there that are not just kind of what we would call a political map, as in it shows the political boundaries of a place. So first of all, you need to know what type of map you're looking at. That's the title. Then you've got orientation. Now, orientation, it's the direction in which a map should be read. Does a map have a compass? That's typically what you will look for. It's the little arrows, points up, goes 4 directions, NESW, also known as north, east, south, west, also known as never eat soggy worms. That's right. Never eat soggy worms. That's how you will remember your directions, northeast, southwest. Never eat soggy worms. Crispy worms, go to town. Slightly gooey worms, go to town. Kind of extra crunchy worms, go to town. Just never eat the soggy worms. It is not good. But you do need to know which way is up. And you might be going, well, isn't the top always up, Mr. Canton? Isn't the top always north? You would think so. However, as I look to the back of my room here, and I wish I could zoom in, but I can't. There is a map there, and that map is oriented with the world kind of upside down from what we would. Uh-oh, hang on. I lost you. Stick with me. But that map is kind of oriented with what we might think of as upside down. But really, what that map is doing is it's putting south on top and instead of north on top. And again, I know you're going, well, north is always up. No, 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 it's not. We know that the world is spherical. The world is round, despite what Kyrie Irving says. We know that the world is round and spherical. And out in space, out in the universe, which way is up? Right? Think about that. Which way is up in our universe? There is no up when you're in space, right? There is no north when you're out there in space. And most of our maps, though, typically orient with north being up and south being on the bottom. That's kind of a design choice, but it's not because that's like the correct choice. So make sure you find your compass so you know the direction you're going. So we've got our title, we've got our orientation, and then D, date. When was it created? Now I want you to stop and think for a second. Why might it be important to know when a map was created? Why might that matter? Well, it might matter because if you're looking at a map that is outdated, that is like really outdated 10, 20, 50 years ago, the map's probably not accurate, right? You might be looking at a historical map in a historical context, and that will give you some information. Or you might be looking at a map to try and navigate around the world. That will give you some information. Or maybe you're looking at a map that is showing like income distribution or standard of living or life expectancy or something like that. A map based on data, not based on country borders. And the more recent the map, the more accurate the information is more likely to be. So you want to know when that map was created. That's what the date is for. Super important. Title, orientation, date, author. Then you also want to know who created the map, right? Was the map designed by me? I'd like to think I'm a pretty good cartographer, a pretty good map maker, but you also want to know, just like when you are evaluating sources, just like when you're evaluating a text or something like that, you want to know who created it so you can know if there's bias or so you can know maybe they are or are not a map making expert, but you want to know who created the map because that will help you to understand how reliable that map is. The L, it stands for legend, sometimes called the key. And what that will do, that will help you understand what the different symbols and what the different colors on the map mean. Now, a lot of times it's obvious. Blue typically is water, and then something a little bit like if we were to see something like this on a map, you'd probably assume that that's mountains, not a giant pit of spikes, but you don't know. And that's the importance of the legend. So once you're looking at that map, look at the title, get yourself oriented, but also check the key because that will help you know what the colors, the letters, and the symbols mean. Then you've got scale. Scale will help you measure distance from point A to point B. This is especially important for our friends like in the Blair Witch. It might only be an inch on the map, but how far does that inch represent? Maybe 1 inch represents 100 yards. Maybe 1 inch represents 50 miles. That's going to be pretty important. If you set off to use a map and you don't know how far it is from point A to point B, that could have some pretty negative outcomes for you. So make sure you check the scale so you can measure distance, and I'll teach you how to do all that. We're just going over what all the symbols on the map mean and all the key features. And then our last one is source. Where did you get the map? Like, is it a map you just found? Is it a map online from a reliable source like National Geographic or maybe Google Earth? Or did you find your map from UncleBob'sBigMapEmporium.com? Right? Again, source and author, those are very similar in terms of the importance, but you want to make sure that you know where your map came from because it will help you assess the reliability of the map. So here they are again. One more time as a quick recap. Totals. We've got title, orientation, date, author, legend, scale, and source. All good maps will have those. All right. All good printed official maps will have some combination, if not all of those key features. So let's take a little bit and go a little bit further here. Let's take a look at this example map. All right. Where is the title on this map? I want you to take a look. Point at your screen. Where is the title on this map? If you pointed at Minnesota, you are correct. Now, again, that might seem obvious to you that this is a map of Minnesota, but not all maps are obvious, but that would be the title. And then orientation. Where is the orientation on this map? Where is the compass on this map? We don't know. It's missing. So we don't know what direction is what. Now, again, we know because we live in Minnesota, like at the top of this map is north, but without the orientation, we wouldn't know for certain. D for date. When was this map created? Well, as you look closely at it, this map is a lot like me in middle school. It is dateless. Womp womp. Yeah, we don't know when this map was created, so we don't necessarily know how accurate it is. Author. Now, this one gets a little bit tricky because we've got two spots where we might see the author. We have nationalatlas.gov up here, but more importantly, down here, it says U.S. Department of Interior, and it also says, well, I can't. I'll move my cursor. It says U.S. Department of the Interior down there, and then it also gives us another, the U.S. Geological Survey down there in the corner. So there's our author. Our legend up top here. Our legend does help us understand what these different symbols mean. So, for example, the yellow here, we see that those are urban areas. You might not know that just looking at it. We see that the dot size represents different size cities. So again, that's what the legend can help us know what the map is telling us and what the symbols mean. Scale, map scale is down here, and we can see that this distance here roughly equates to 100 miles. And so we could, for example, use a scale strip, which we'll learn in a later lesson, to calculate distance. And then source. This map was from nationalatlas.gov. Nationalatlas.gov. Title, orientation, we added one in there. Date, now we see one is down on there. Author, we see the author down here. Our legend and what the symbols mean. Our map scale and our source. Totals, title, orientation, date, author, legend, scale, source. Now, those are all official maps, but maps don't come just on paper or just digitally. We also have mental maps. What is a mental map? A mental map is a map that exists in your mind. And only you have it. Well, I have one too, but we all have our own mental maps. Some of our mental maps are more detailed than others. Some of us have an incredibly detailed mental map of the world. Some of us, our mental map only exists as far as like our community, like STMA or our house or our neighborhood. Right? Some of us know a lot of locations around the world and a lot of countries, and some of us could point them out. And others, we might struggle to point out certain places on the world. Here's the deal. I'm not saying that you need to memorize the location of all 200 some countries around the world on a map. That would be nice. But you don't necessarily need to do that. What you do need to know is you need to have a good relative mental map, right? When we're talking about different countries or regions of the world, you should have a pretty good idea about where that is physically located on the globe, and then a little bit about that region, a little bit about the culture of the region, a little bit about the climate of the region. The 5 theme stuff we were looking at last week, you should have a little bit understanding about the big themes for each region of the world. And if you don't have that yet, great. That's why you're here. That is part of the purpose of this class. So, for example, do you need a map to get to the bus in the morning? No, probably not, right? You don't need a map. Can you imagine how awful that would be? You walk out your front door, you got to go find the cheese wagon so you can get to school, and you're like, oh no, where do I go? Let me check a map. No, you just know that you walk down the street, you turn the corner, and that's where the cheese wagon picks you up every day. Do you need a map to get to the bathroom? No. Now, maybe the first time you stepped into this building, you might have needed a map to go to the bathroom, but can you imagine if every time you had to go to the bathroom, you had to check the map by the door? Imagine that. You're sitting there, you're shaking in your seat, you're shaking, you're crossing your legs, you really got to pee. And then you go find a bathroom and you don't know where it is, so you got to read a map to try and figure that out. That would be terrible. But you don't need one for that because you've got a mental map of this building. Do you need a map to get around STMA? Now, maybe if you didn't grow up here or you're new to the community, you might need a map to know how to get from here, Middle School West, to say the Outlet Mall, or to T-Bell, or to Community Ed, or to the AC. You might need a map to do those things. But at this point, if I told you from right where you are sitting right now, picture how are you going to get to Middle School West? You could probably do it without a map. If I told you from where you're sitting right now, picture how are you going to get to the AC? You could probably do that without a map, right? Because you've got a mental map of our community. But do you need a map to find countries like Iraq, China, Russia, right? If I gave you a big blank map of the world, could you point them out? Maybe. Could you point them out exactly? Maybe not. Could you point out the proper region of the world? I hope so, right? Hopefully you know where some of these countries are around the world. Even if you don't know exactly where it is, hopefully you have kind of the region that they're a part of. So why do we use mental maps? Well, we use them to live, to get around our life so that we're not constantly looking at a map everywhere we go. We use them to get to the store, to get to work, to get to school, to get around the mall in a pre-COVID area, right? We use maps to just basically navigate our life so that we're not constantly plugging something in on a phone for our GPS or looking at a big old paper map or something like that, because that's super unwieldy. Right? We use mental maps to give directions to our BFF so they can come on over and eat Cheetos and play games with us and do a little gaming, right? We don't give them detailed, necessarily turn-by-turn directions like a GPS, but we use relative directions, right? We say, oh yeah, I just live over, just across the street from the AC. I live behind the Mac Shack, right? We give them directions. We use mental maps for those things. We use mental maps to most importantly, understand our world and how it is interconnected. Okay, and so your mental map right now, it's probably a little thin, and that's okay. Again, that's why we're in this class, right? That's why we're here, to improve our mental maps, to get a better understanding of our world. So here's kind of an example of what I'm talking about with a mental map. So here's another comment. It says, I can only show you the way home to my house if you drive me back to school first. So here's little dude. She's in the car, and she's here. And so in order to get back to her house, we have to drive all the way back to school. And then from school, we can get back to her house. Now notice they're pretty close, and that's kind of the joke, right? We might have good mental maps from certain places that we visit regularly, but if she had a better mental map, she'd realize that she was 3 blocks from home and that she doesn't have to go back to school. And that's kind of how a mental map works, right? We all have our own little kind of understanding of our world. And the more detailed our map is, the better off we will be. So it is your turn. Yeah. What I want you to do, I want you to find a sheet of paper. I want you to get something to write with, and I want you to find a space where there are no maps present. You'll notice there's a timer up here in the corner. In a second, I'm going to start that timer. And when I start that timer, you are going to have 7 minutes to create a map of the world. The entire world. Not just like your little world, but the entire world. I want you to draw all of the continents. There are 7 of them: North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and Antarctica. I want you to draw the oceans if you can, Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Arctic. I want you to put a compass, don't forget totals, right? But I want you to label as many physical features as you possibly can, landforms, bodies of water. And maybe you're like, well, I don't know the name of the mountains. I know there's a mountain range over here in the middle of Southeast Asia, but I don't know what it's called. That's fine. Just draw mountains and call it mountains. You don't need to necessarily know the names. Or maybe you're like, oh, I think this part of the world is actually desert and this part of the world is like tropical rainforest. Go ahead and label it like that. But what I want you to do is to label as much as you can. You've got 7 minutes, and I want you to try and do it for the full 7 minutes. Now, you folks at home, set that timer. Well, I'm going to set it here as well, and do it for 7 minutes. Don't give up after a minute. Yes, I know it's hard. I get it. That's the point, right? I completely understand that this is a challenging thing to do. I get that, but I want you to try. It's not going to be any fun if you give up after 30 seconds. It's not going to be any fun if you like look at a map and copy it. That's not what this is about. This is just about your ability to create your own mental map, okay? And so again, be as detailed as you can, put in as many images and text and direction, just put as much info as you can on that map in 7 minutes, okay? So like I said, I'm gonna start the timer for 7 minutes. I'm gonna check back with you in 7 minutes, and we're gonna kind of see how your mental map turned out. All right, so best of luck, 7 minutes, and I'll see you in a bit. Whoop, shoot, oh no, shoot. Let's try this again. There we go, 7 minutes. Good luck. No cheating. Seriously, give it your best. I'll be right back. I gotta run and put my lunch away so I don't get botulism. Got about a minute 20 to go, gang. Here's the deal. Remember, you're trying to label as much as you can. Don't forget about titles. Does your map have a title? What about orientation? Date. Today's date, Monday, September 21st. Author, that's you. Legend. Now, again, you might be drawing like mountain ranges and things like that on your map because you don't know like the names of the mountain, but you know that there's mountains there. So maybe you've got like little symbols like I talked about. Whoop, there we go. Little mountains. So that would be your legend. Map scale. Doesn't need to be accurate, but estimate it. Source, that would be your brain. So make sure your map has all of those things. And again, you can use words on a map too, not just symbols. Right? So you can describe certain areas based on climate or physical features or culture or any of those types of things. But you've got 30 seconds to go to finish up your mental map. I will let you do it in peace. 20. 10. Whoa, holy cats. All right. I was not expecting a siren to play there. I just thought it was going to be like a little beep or something like that. Anyway, how did it turn out? I hope it turned out well. Please, please, please bring it with you. Please bring it with you when you come back to class because we're going to be collecting these for a little thing that we do at the end of the year. And then if you're not able to bring it into school, please snap a picture of it and email that to me. Anyway, moving right along here, that's really it, right? Those are our kind of key things to keep in mind. I'm gonna, kind of the big thing that we looked at today. You know what? Let's go like this, and we'll just kind of bring it back to the start here. You've got, of course, your availability to read these slides on your own. But again, why are maps important? Well, they'll save your life. Can you identify the main features on a map? Title, orientation, date, author, legend, scale, and source? Of course you can. Title, orientation, date, author, legend, scale, source. Can you do that on a map? And then lastly, could you create a mental map? There you go. You just did it. So next kind of activity here and kind of the next little video series, we're going to dive into some of these things and we're going to actually use some of our map skills and learn some map skills. But that's what we got for today. So I hope you're doing well and I will talk to you later. See ya.